Our story starts on a moonless night as the earth settled over Kokumo's grave. A silent scream echoes through darkness, an omen of vengeance unleashed, waiting to reclaim justice from the grave. Hello everyone, welcome to Fortune City Stories. Do remember to subscribe, like, and drop comments. And now, let's continue our story. In the village of Ayetoro, in the ancient Iluoro, life flowed with old tradition. Villagers lived closely, honoring custom and showing deep respect to their gods. The village sat between green hills and winding rivers, where every festival and ritual was celebrated with care. At night, stars filled the sky watching over their lives. Kokumo was a beautiful and kind woman, loved by all in Ayetoro, or so we thought. Her husband, Olumide, was wealthy and respected. Although they seemed happy, their marriage was troubled beneath the surface. Kokumo could not have children, which caused her deep sadness. In a village that valued family and legacy, this made her a target for gossip. Some women, jealous of her grace, whispered spiteful things about her. One day, Olumide became ill, bedridden with fever. The village grew tense, wondering what had caused the sickness of the wealthiest man in the village. The elders met in secret, guided by a clever priestess who convinced them that Kokumo was to blame. She accused Kokumo of witchcraft, saying Kokumo caused her husband out of envy. The village, ruled by fear and superstition, quickly believed her. Kokumo begged to be heard, but the village turned against her. Even Olumide betrayed her, seeing her as a burden and hoping to move on with someone else, which was none other than the priestess' sister. Coldly, Olumide abandoned her, driven by his own selfish desire. Late at night, villagers gathered with shovels and lanterns to dig a shallow grave. With sadness and fear, they led Kokumo to the grave in order to appease the god on behalf of Olumide. Kokumo's hands were tied and her tears in her eyes. As they covered her with earth, a silent cry for justice went unanswered. Returning home, the villagers felt the weight of what had been done. The stars seemed dim, as if mourning for Kokumo, but the night was only the beginning. For the spirit of a woman wronged lay beneath the ground, and a storm of reckoning was coming to Ayetoro. So after Kokumo's burial, a strange calm fell over Ayetoro. Villagers tried to go about their daily lives, but a heavy sense of guilt hung in the air. Each evening, as the sun set, the silence became more eerie, and the villagers' unease grew, not knowing who would be the next. On the fourth night after Kokumo's burial, a storm came. Dark clouds and thunder filled the sky, and rain poured down, beating against thatched roof. As the storm raged, the earth shook silently, and a cold wind swept through the village, making the tree rustle like they were mourning. During a flash of lightning, something strange happened at Kokumo's grave. The soil began to shift as if it were alive. Then, with a final tremor, Kokumo rose from her grave, wet and disheveled, but with a powerful, determined look. Her eyes, once warm, now burned with strange light, covered in death and rain. Kokumo seems to glow faintly, standing out against the dark night. The pain and betrayal had changed her, and she returned with a need for revenge. As Kokumo stood, the storm seemed to recognize her. The wind roared and the rain poured harder, as if nature itself was watching her return. She stood in the storm like a ghost of vengeance, casting a dark shadow over Ayetoro. That night, our revenge began. In the homes of those who betrayed her, villagers had terrifying dreams. They saw Kokumo's face filled with anger and sadness, accusing them silently. The dream left them frightened and unable to sleep. Ayetoro, once peaceful, was now full of restless nights and whispers of fear. The priestess who had blamed Kokumo was the first to face her wrath. That night, she woke to find her shrine in disarray, sacred items scattered, and ropes were torn. She even found strange, deep scratches on her arms and legs, as if made by invincible claws. Normally confident, the priestess was now full of fear and unable to explain the terror she felt. As day passed, the village trouble grew. Crop withered, livestock fell ill, and the lively spirit of Ayetoro turned into one of fear. The elders, desperate to understand, gathered to discuss the strange events. Meanwhile, Kokumo's spirit roared and roamed Ayetoro at night. A silent, vengeful presence, a ghostly figure, appeared at the edge of the villager's sight, disappearing as if they looked directly, but leaving a cold chill. She focused on those who betrayed her, haunting them as a reminder of their wrongdoing. Olumide, weighed down by guilt, began to lose control. He heard whispers in the wind, saw shadows in his vision, and felt a cold presence that made him question his sanity. The once powerful man was now just a shadow of himself, haunted by his betrayal. As Kokumo's spirit continued her revenge, Ayetoro fell into chaos. What began with a grave injustice had turned the once harmonious village into a place of fear, and nightmare had only just begun. The haunting face. The days in Ayetoro were now filled with fear and suspicious. The once lively village had turned dark and tense, with strange events happening daily that left everyone on the edge. The villagers, already nervous, grew more afraid as the whispers of Kokumo's angry spirit roamed the village. Even the bravest among them couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Nightfall no longer brought peace. Instead, it brought new fear, as shadows seemed to move on their own. Olumide, once respected, was now haunted by guilt. Each night, he dreamed of Kokumo's face, her eyes filled with burning rage, and he could wake up soaked in sweat, heart pounding. By day, he was a shadow of himself, tormented by the memory of what he had done. His new wife, Adebimpe, who was also suffering. She had married Olumide, hoping for a fresh start, and due to her sister's influence, but instead found herself trapped in a nightmare. She began to see ghostly figures and heard whispers that made her question her own sanity. One night, she felt an icy hand touch her arm. She jumped out of bed, but there was no one there. Only a cold wind in the room. The priestess, who had falsely accused Kokumo, was now living in constant fear. Her shrine was in ruins, and she often saw visions of Kokumo. She could no longer perform a ritual peacefully. Instead, her mind was crumbling under the weight of her fear. Her prayers for protection seemed to go unheard, leaving her defenseless against Kokumo's wrath. One by one, the people involved in Kokumo's death faced strange and tragic ends. The village elder, who had approved Kokumo's burial, was found dead, his face frozen in terror. No one could explain his death, but his body showed signs of someone who had faced something horrifying. Ayetoro's crop, once thriving, began to wither. The river, the village main source of life, ran dry, and the livestock fell ill. The village economy collapsed and people felt the full impact of Kokumo's anger. As the haunting worsened, the village elders gathered in desperation. They knew those events were not coincidences. They were a direct result of Kokumo's unjust death. They tried rituals and sacrifices to calm our spirit, but every attempt seems to make the haunting worse. Olumide's fear reached a breaking point. He could no longer tell what was real or imagined, and every shadow or sound made him think Kokumo was coming for him. He became paranoid, acting strangely and distancing himself from the village. In a last attempt to find peace, Olumide confessed his role in Kokumo's death to the villagers. He admitted to the false accusations and betrayal. His confession came during a time of intense supernatural activities, and the villagers listened in stunned silence. Instead of easing their fears, his confession only confirmed them. Kokumo's spirit was indeed seeking revenge. The village was now on the edge of collapse, torn between guilt and relentless force of Kokumo's rage. They knew they had to do something. The haunting had reached its peak, leaving Ayetoro to face the consequences of their actions and the fury of a woman wronged. The final reckoning. The village of Ayetoro was drowning in despair. The once lively community had become a shadow of its former self. Haunted by a spirit of Kokumo, fear and suspicions filled the air. The villagers could no longer tell what was real and what was supernatural. A final reckoning was approaching, and a confrontation that would decide the fate of both the living and the dead. Kokumo's spirit was growing stronger, fueled by the pain of her unjust death, and her anger was focused and eating hard on Olumide. He had tried to hide from the village, but her vengeance found him. He was haunted by visions of Kokumo, a ghostly form appearing more often, a presence, an ever-growing shadow over his life. One night, as the village lay uneasy, Kokumo's ghost appeared at Olumide's doorstep. The wind howled as the storm began, the same storm that marked our resurrection. Olumide, driven by the edge of madness of his guilt, could grasp that Kokumo was really there. His eyes, once sharp and proud, were now clouded with terror. Kokumo stood before Olumide, glowing with a ghostly light. She spoke with a voice full of sadness and strength, reminding him of how he betrayed her. Olumide, frozen with fear, listened as a word cut through, exposing his guilt. Her accusations were more than just words. They were filled with sorrow and anger. The earth beneath Olumide trembled and his house shook. The wind carried our grief, filling the air with a heavy sense of doom. Overcome by guilt and fear, Olumide fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness. The village elders, hearing Olumide's desperate cry, gathered in one last attempt to restore peace. They performed ancient ritual, asking gods and ancestors to help them. The air was thick with incense and prayer, but the tension remained. The villagers sensed that peace was still out of reach. As Kokumo and Olumide's confrontation reached its peak, a final act of vengeance unfolded. She focused all her rage on him. At last, he met the justice she had sought. Olumide's life was taken by the same force that had haunted him, both a release and a punishment for his action. With Olumide's death, the silence over Ayetoro was loud. The storm calmed and the wind carried away the last trace of Kokumo's spirit. Slowly, the village found peace. The crops started to grow again and the river flowed more once again. And livestock regained health, signaling a new beginning. The village elders, deeply sorry for their role in Kokumo's death and the chaos that followed, gathered to honor her memory. They held a grand ritual to seek forgiveness and restore balance. The ceremony acknowledged their failures and aimed to bring healing to the village. With Kokumo's spirit finally at peace, Ayetoro was left with a lasting lesson from the haunting. Her story became a legend, a reminder of the price of betrayal and the power of justice. Forever changed, the village moved forward, united with a respect for truth and compassion. If you enjoy this thrilling narrative and want to hear more captivating story from Fortune City or Iluoro, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest story and never miss a moment of our enchanting content.